Committee into session and start by
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome. We will open the hearing at this time on Senate Bill 379 FN and recognize the prime sponsor, Senator Dave Waters. Welcome and good morning.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 379. I think you have before you a replace all amendment, which I will discuss in a moment, but I thought I'd say just a few words about why we are where we are on our solid waste crisis in New Hampshire. It's been clear for several years we have a solid waste capacity crisis as DES is projecting not too many years in the future that our existing landfills will begin to run out of space. Some expansion has been approved and is possible, but otherwise we know we have a looming problem. 2 years ago, there was a study committee conducted in the House that made about 20 recommendations what to do about this solid waste crisis and the attendant price escalation that it's causing for our communities and taxpayers. I took an important step last year when we passed my bill as part of House Bill 315 to revive the 10-year plan for solid waste reduction, and the New Hampshire DES is working on that. In the last couple of years, some new problems have arisen. There has been a real turmoil in the recycling market because of activities taken by China and other countries to refuse to receive American waste, and then also difficulties in sustaining a market for municipalities, so that a lot of municipalities have been just throwing their recyclable materials into the waste stream, and that came along too with the great escalation in tipping fees for our communities. I'll just speak to Dover. We've seen almost a doubling, and we heard on the committee 2 years ago and since then about a doubling or tripling in some communities what they're doing for their tipping fees. And of course last year, you know, the looming crisis came really punctuation mark with the issues around the landfill proposed for Dalton and Forest Lake, and I think that did a lot to get our attention, particularly the problem of the amount of waste that's coming in from out of state. It's about half, about 1 million tons a year from out of states. Most of the other states around us for many years have been reducing that by establishing fees or one way or another. So a little bit of history on 379. I think Senator Guido particularly will recall 2 years ago when we worked on the earlier version of this bill and really had worked out a way to get around the interstate commerce clause prohibition on fees being only applied to out of state by a methodology as outlined in this bill where we would have charged a tipping fee and rebated it back to communities in various ways, and I think we had a pretty good agreement around that time. But the bill got COVIDized, like a lot of others, and so I brought it back this year. But it has over the last week, it has become clear that the fee issue, though rebated to New Hampshire folks, would be problematic for getting the support of the governor and others this time around. So that's why you have a substitute amendment. And what it does is it takes the part of the bill that set up the Solid Waste Management Fund, but it does not fund it through that tipping fee. And here you'll see some general language about the concerns, some definitions, but then the purpose of the fund is to provide a way to give matching grants to New Hampshire municipalities, private entities, and businesses for projects that provide demonstrated significant improvement in waste diversion methods and contribute to reduction of waste, including hazardous waste materials, et and this program then would provide DES with a way of getting grants out to communities. And those of you who work with solid waste issues in your communities know that people are really scrambling for what to do about recycling, what to do about diversion, what to do about hazardous waste, and so forth. Particularly here on page 2, I want to point out on line 3 this reference to the environmental protection agencies. There is funding that has currently been approved in the infrastructure bill for major grants concerning recycling and solid waste. And so we anticipate that if we have in statute a fund such as this, it will give us a leg up on being able to apply and secure what could be substantial funds, even to the point we might be able to fund a materials recycling facility in the state, which we don't have, and that's been a huge issue for transportation costs. We're going to send, municipalities have to send these unsorted materials for recycling down to Massachusetts and elsewhere. So this bill will set us up well for that. But you also notice that I recommend in the bill a $500,000 appropriation to get this started. And, we're not in a budget year. I get that. But I think this is really a special case that we have an opportunity to get this ramped up. Good chance we'll get EPA funding. But what this does is that it helps us immensely in dealing with the solid waste crisis that we face now. We know we're going to see other bills like House Bill 177 dealing with the Forest Lake and Dalton situation, but it really is statewide. We're running out of capacity. We had some expansion up in Rochester that was approved, and that puts that out a few years, but many of our municipal and our large commercial solid waste facilities are going to be running out of space. So we need a head start on it. I think this would be money well spent. I think there might be some sources that the committee and the governor could tap for it, and I think it send a very strong message to the folks, particularly in the North Country around Forest Lake, that we really are trying to do something about this problem. So that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill forward. I appreciate all of the time and work that you've put towards this effort.
And your help, too. Thank you, Senator.
Can you tell me the appropriation line and what do you think the $500,000 will do?
Yeah, what it will do is you'll see up above in 2 that DES we know is quite underfunded. They're doing a little better right now in terms of personnel who might be able to help this, but we need somebody in place there to do that. But then this money would go out and it would say, can they get a compactor? Can they set up a recycling program if they don't already have one? Can it help set up an MRF? Can it even provide a dumpster? I mean, there's a lot of things that the NRRA is providing now, grants to municipalities, but they can only do so much. So there's a lot of activity around composting, a lot of activity around plastics, a lot of activity around paper. So in each of these cases, municipalities come forward and get grants to get the equipment they need and to set up what they need to set up to do it.
Thank you. Follow up?
Please.
Thank you. If the funding that you had mentioned, lines 3 and 4 on page 2, is available, do you see this $500,000 as necessary? Could we change the wording to say something else?
Well, I really we'll hear from Mike Wimsat and Mike Nork perhaps about their estimations on, when that funding might be available and what the criteria might be and whether a state effort will be something that will set us up for that, but also potentially be necessary for it. But I will say this, it will be some time regardless before those funds arrive, be, months if not a year. We need to do something now. And I think it's a relatively small expenditure to get us going to help our communities, help our taxpayers, but also we really need the capacity in the Department of Environmental Services. That was so clear in our study committee. That was so clear in the process when we passed last year the bill for the 10-year plan. Everything fell apart about 15 years ago on this. And we know why, what happened with the budgets back then. And it's been a really hard thing to build back up, and the problems, we're in the situation we are now because of what we didn't do before. This would provide seed money, yes, but also stability moving forward. So we're not this fits and starts and so on. And again, I do think there might potentially be some sources from ERA funding or elsewhere that could be directed to something like this.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Waters, for your presentation. The amendments are flip from the legislation. First question, if I might. Obviously, the 500,000 versus the 2 million that you would have got by the fee makes an enormous difference in an appropriation. Do you still think the 500,000 is enough to do what you want?
Yeah, I think we'll hear from, I'm not sure which is testifying, whether it's Mike Wimsat or Michael Nork, as we discussed that figure, that we needed to have something in that level that would be substantial enough to really get going on it. Now, the amount that we would have gotten from the previous tipping fee, do note that a fair amount of that was going to be rebated back, so that we weren't looking at quite that much. I mean, that was a gross figure, but the net figure would have been a little less. And we could do a lot with that. And anyway, so I think this is a substantial and necessary investment, and I think that what potential there is for the EPA and other funding, and potentially industry funding here too. I mean, I can see perhaps when it comes to construction of MRF, which we know Casella has been interested in doing, that we might have an opportunity for a public-private partnership there.
So, but your premise is the 500,000 is enough to begin the program and to move it forward.
Yeah, and not just begin it administratively, thank you, Senator, but to really make some important grants that right now will help our communities out.
Sure, absolutely. Then on line 5 on page 2, you talk about raising the money or going to the Environmental Protection Agency, and you say when received may be deposited. Don't you think that should be shall be deposited?
Yeah, probably. I think it's just something I missed.
Right.
Yes.
And you fill the
That's why we have the fund. That's why we have the fund. Thank you for that.
So I just think that that's consistent with your logic.
Yeah. And thank you, Senator, for detecting that I have a logic. I appreciate that. It's a nice gesture.
It's your professorial demeanor that we all are enamored with.
Okay.
I hate to correct the professor, but I was a minor student at the university. But I just think that would be more appropriate.
That's what it should be.
In terms of where you want the money to.
Yeah.
It shall go there and for that purpose. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's it for me.
Thank you. Senator Daniels.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Waters, there are some significant differences between 379 as introduced and the amendment. Could you tell me if all the co-sponsors are in agreement with the amendment?
Thank you, Senator. As I said, this issue the need to amend this bill just came up at the end of last week because of what I heard about responses from the governor's office. And so I just got this amendment at 8:30 this morning. And I can't speak for Representative Ebo, but she knows about it and she's here. But I have not had a chance to share it with everybody before right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Further questions? All right, welcome, Senator Rosenwald. What does this legislation establish that doesn't currently exist? In other words,
It establishes the fund,
okay,
it establishes its purpose, and it addresses the crisis that we're facing, as you'll see by the findings language.
all right.
And it also, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, Senator, but I think what's also important here is that piece about mentioning the EPA, because if we have this in statute, we might have a substantial leg up on being able to secure that grant funding, which is going to be competitive grants.
Okay, are those grants competitive? Are they applied for by the states, or can municipalities themselves apply for those grants? In other words, can we relegate this function to already existing entities that do recycling, or communities that have landfills or whatever?
I'm not sure the rules are developed on it yet. I think it's to the states, but I'm not sure. But I think perhaps we'll get an answer from DES on that. And let me just mention, Senator, that I think that why a state role and leadership here is important, because there is a need for administration and for expertise that the state can provide the municipality might not have. And also, a lot of these things are going to be regional solutions. So I think that, it really does make sense for DES to play a role here. But we'll hear about whether those grants are contingent. I think whatever that reality might be in terms of the EPA, I do think we need a state effort on this.
Thank you. Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. Just one follow-up.
Yeah.
In the initial bill, there would be potential where municipalities would not have to match the funds that they received to make recycling improvements. But in the amendment, it calls for a matching grant fund. Do you see that as a 50-50 or?
I would think that was, thank you for your question. I think we developed the rules. I think the reason we had the opt-out on the matching in the original bill was because we had the situation of Nashua and some other places that had their own landfills. And so that we were giving the money back to them, and so why do they have to match it? You see what I'm saying? Because they have their own landfill. So that's why that was put in that way.
Further questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have speaking, it's like Natch Grays, speaking in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nate Grace for the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We are in favor of this bill.
Can you pull the mic closer, or feel free to
Yep.
remove your mask if you like, either way?
Yep. We are in favor of this bill. Our position has been for both the prior iteration and this iteration that we at NHMA want to help find a solution, because landfills are running out of capacity, and we're quite aware of that, and we're aware that we need to pursue various options. Our understanding of the way that this bill would operate, even with the amendment, is that any funding that would have to come from municipalities would essentially be rebated through one of these grant programs, and that's really why we're in favor of the bill, because we think that would provide a solution without costing municipalities additional monies. And I'm happy to take questions.
Questions from the committee? I have a question. You might not be the right person to answer it, but we eliminate a state surcharge, and I probably should have asked Senator Waters. I heard you mention the Commerce Clause. Can you elucidate on that issue? And if not, Senator, you're welcome back. Yeah.
Thank you. Excuse me. We had years ago put such a fee in statute, but the Interstate Commerce Clause, because that original one in statute said just out-of-state waste, an Interstate Commerce Clause wouldn't allow you to put a fee just on out-of-state waste because that was disadvantaging interstate commerce. So the way the original bill was set up was to say, we're going to charge everybody, but we're going to grant it back to municipalities, and that passed the legal muster.
So is that a court decision rendered?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
I'm just
not
curious.
on this particular one, but it's why we did not implement it, because there was court cases on that.
I would understand it if it was a state to a state, but we're looking with private entities that are bringing their trash up to New Hampshire. We
that's-
charge them taxes that are different between states and so forth, so.
That's
Again,
the way the courts see it.
I'd like to see some more on that.
Yeah,
Just
thank you.
because I'm not certain that, I need to see that decision. If you could provide either a reference,
There
that'd
is
be good.
statute on that. I mean, there are rulings, there's Supreme Court ruling on it.
All right, thank you. Any further testimony or any questions? Senator Daniels.
Thank you. I believe you just made a statement that one of the reasons you support this was that municipal costs would be refunded from the state?
Correct.
Correct.
What gives you the impression that the state will have the money to refund municipalities?
Well, that's my understanding based on how we understand that this program is going to work as a whole. Obviously, there's going to be additional testimony, and I'd certainly defer to DES for further explanation about how this program might be set up, because I think they're more familiar with it than I am.
Follow-up?
Please.
Are you aware at this time that the legislative requests just in the Senate for appropriations off the budget exceed the amount of surplus we have?
I'm not aware of that.
Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, speaking in opposition, Kirsten Koch, I think. Koch, okay, Koch, there we go. Sorry. Representing the BIA. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. There we go. For the record, my name is Kirsten Koch. I'm the Director of Public Policy for the Business and Industry Association, also known as BIA. We serve as
Kirsten, can you pull the mic closer?
Sure, I'm short. And we serve as the statewide Chamber of Commerce, representing more than 400 members. So I was originally here today to express BIA's opposition to Senate Bill 379 as originally written. And our concern is that the surcharge established in this bill is a tax on solid waste that would add to the cost of managing solid waste for businesses. Furthermore, we were concerned that this bill targets commercial industry as a source of funding specifically for this fund and results in cost shifting to the business community. We are pleased, though, to see Senator Water brought forward this amendment eliminating the tax from the bill. So we do support that change in the amendment. And that would conclude my testimony. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
All right, any questions from members of the committee? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Can you tell me, do you think that the amended version of the bill will actually reduce solid waste costs for businesses in New Hampshire because it would create new recycling opportunities and lower the overall tonnage that we see go into landfills?
Thank you for your question, Senator. I don't believe I have the answer to that question. I don't know if it would necessarily reduce the costs. The funding that the bill would offer, as originally written, requires businesses to take efforts such as hiring additional consultants to look at their solid waste. So I don't know if the bill originally as written would necessarily reduce costs for the businesses.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, speaking in favor, Mark Morgan from the City of Lebanon. Good morning and welcome. Turn the mic on. There you go.
Good morning, and thank you for your time and hearing my
All right,
testimony.
you're going to have to pull the mic closer because you're soft-spoken, or else you're going to have to yell, one of the two.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you for your time this morning and hearing my testimony. The City of Lebanon, New Hampshire owns and operates.
Mark, go ahead and identify yourself for the record, okay? Thanks.
Mark Morgan, Solid Waste Manager for the City of Lebanon.
Thank you.
Lebanon, New Hampshire. The City of Lebanon owns and operates a landfill in West Lebanon, New Hampshire. This landfill is operated for its residents and businesses, as well as 21 other communities located in the Upper Valley. The city serves the disposal and recycling and composting needs for nearly 90,000 people in the Upper Valley. I'm here today to represent the City of Lebanon in support of Senate Bill 379. As part of the city's agreements with its community partners, towns are obligated to reduce waste. Many of our communities are small communities that just don't have the budgets to support adding additional efforts towards reducing waste. Unfortunately, there are very limited resources available to these communities to address waste reduction, recycling, and composting. Increased disposal costs that people are referring to this morning are simply not enough for communities to look at alternatives to traditional waste disposal. In many cases, solid waste is one of the single largest budget items in these small communities' operating budgets. Senate Bill 379, even as amended, will provide funding opportunity to allow communities to expand existing municipal recycling and waste reduction programs, or create them for that matter. The state of New Hampshire is currently facing a disposal deficit with landfill capacity throughout the Northeast dwindling. Ensuring that landfills and disposal sites are compliant with all environmental regulations is important. However, looking to the future and planning for those future disposal needs is absolutely critical for New Hampshire and has been absent for more than a decade. Although recently NHDES has made changes to its waste division, there has been virtually no solid waste planning in New Hampshire for more than a decade. Senate Bill 379 will provide resources, as previously presented, to DES to develop a solid waste master plan and assist communities in identifying future disposal or recycling needs. This funding provided through the bill will also allow DES to increase the number of technical assistant staff, again, as previously presented. Currently, solid waste operators are trained, but this, even with the fund that is created, will allow municipalities to get more training and have a better understanding of what recycling opportunities may exist. Senate Bill 379 has no dollar impact on New Hampshire communities. It provides an opportunity for these communities to obtain needed assistance to best move their municipal recycling programs forward. Without planning for New Hampshire's future disposal needs, our landfill and disposal future is unknown. Senate Bill 379 will help fund solid waste planning. This bill will also provide necessary funding to DES Waste Division to help provide technical assistance to communities throughout New Hampshire. I'll entertain any questions at this
All
time.
right, any questions for Mark? Yes, Senator Daniels.
Thank you. Does Lebanon have a recycling committee?
No, we do not. Not specifically. The City of Lebanon has a number of groups, Lebanon Energy Advisory, which addresses solid waste issues, as well as Sustainable Lebanon. So we don't have a specific recycling committee, but there are a number of groups that meet and discuss this issue.
Hello?
Please.
What are those groups proposing as far as reduction in solid waste? How to go about it, what to do?
So currently, the City of Lebanon has developed food scrap composting programs that are available as a drop-off for residents. We've worked with area businesses to offer a similar program at the curb, reducing food scraps that ultimately go into the landfill. This past year, the City of Lebanon has developed an app to better educate the public as to what is and is not recyclable at our recycling center. We have a searchable website for items that are and are not recyclable and how to manage those items. So through education and program expansion, the City of Lebanon is addressing a number of these waste issues.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Delson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming down. Is there a market for your recycling products?
We have not had a problem moving our recyclables even during COVID. We have a source-separated process, not commingled, and we process those recyclables on site and bale them, and they're mill-ready. So we have agreements with buyers directly. We do use the Northeast Resource Recovery Association and others to market those products. So we're not sitting on any material ourselves.
Further question? What do you perceive of as the lifespan of your facility, your waste facility? How much life is left?
So currently, the City of Lebanon's landfill is permitted for another 9 to 10 years. We're working on a 60 to 70 year disposal plan for the site. And one thing I will say is we're talking a lot about landfills. If you look back 10 or 20 years as to how we managed waste, although we were using landfills, the equipment and technology that was used at that time was quite different. Larger compactors, greater density being placed in landfills. So 10 to 20 years from now could be very different than it is today. We're talking about how do we expand the life of our landfills. I think what's going to be necessary moving forward is what is going to be available in the waste industry in managing waste over the next decade or two. Could be very different. There's waste conversion technologies and all sorts of things. Unfortunately, New Hampshire is focused on just making sure that our landfills last without looking to the future. And discussions like this and bills like this help provide opportunity for further discussion and research.
Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Further questions? I have what I would call a strategic question. It seems to me that a large part, if not most of the burgeoning problem is the collapse of the recyclable industry, so to speak, that there's no markets for it. And so can you address, if you would, from your perspective, how this bill would help us deal with that?
So I don't know that this, speaking for myself, I don't know that this bill will necessarily address global recycling markets. However, there's an enormous amount of activity going on domestically throughout the United States through the assistance of the U.S. government, tax incentives, and a variety of programs to help existing businesses expand their offerings to municipalities and other businesses for recycling purposes. As a result, part of the issue with the collapse is COVID impacted transportation networks moving material overseas. Prior to that, China shut the world off to a number of recycling commodities. So there was a lot of global shakeup that was coming for a lot of years. It was not a shock. It was coming for a lot of years. What this program would do is to allow municipalities to take advantage of some of these new emerging domestic markets. It would allow them to purchase containers or balers, as was mentioned earlier, and prepare material for market as opposed to relying on overseas markets that are no longer there. And instead of propping those up, it help us take advantage of some more local options. In Lebanon, the reason we've done well is our material is all managed domestically. We've secured markets and we've not moved from those markets for 15, 20 years. We have good relationships with our buyers. We understand those specifications. So changes are very minimal when the markets fluctuate. We don't deviate from that plan. When the market goes up, if our buyer doesn't necessarily go up, we stick with them. When the market went down, our product continued to move because they honored those relationships. We just have a different philosophy. As a municipality, we're there to provide a service. Even if it doesn't make the most money, we continue to provide that service to our customers.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I don't know if
There we go.
I don't know who to ask this of, but I'm looking at the fiscal note, which is on the original bill, and I'm wondering if the amendment changes it. I guess it's really a question for you, Mr. Chairman. Is LBA going to do a new fiscal note?
I'm sorry.
Is the LBA going to be able to?
We can certainly ask them
Update
to
it.
come. Yeah, we can certainly get information from them. I'm not sure if they're here today. I don't
Okay.
see them.
That would be great. Thank you.
So, further questions? Hearing none? Thank you very much. Thank you. And Senator Waters, have you prepared or in process of getting a fiscal note together for the amendment?
In fact, Mr. Chairman, I will request, but as I said, this was produced at 8:30 this
I can't
morning.
hear you.
This amendment was produced at 8:30 this morning.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yes, it's in process is the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next to testify is Stephen Ridgey. Did I get that right?
Audrey, C-O-G-G-I?
There you go.
That's me.
Thank you. Your penmanship is as good as my reading.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. Happy to be here. My role with the company, Waste Management, I'm the Director of Disposal Operations for New England. And we, in New Hampshire, operate the turnkey recycling facility and landfill. We have over 200 solid waste and recycling collection trucks. We have a MRF operating in New Hampshire, so we've got some experience in this area.
For the record, a MRF is,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Material Recovery Facility.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. We manage in some form about 40% of the solid waste generated in the state of New Hampshire in some form or another. I want to commend the legislature for the work they've done recently. Folks here, Representative Karen Ebel and Senator David Waters, focusing on solid waste issues, developing recently the solid waste working group, which we're participating in. We think that's really important, will help get New Hampshire closer to where they need to be relative to increasing waste diversion, recycling activities and efforts that are being proposed in the state. And we would encourage the legislature to see that working group come up with recommendations before enacting significant legislation in this area. That being said, my comments are based on the original bill as submitted. We're encouraged, just reading briefly this morning, the revisions that were offered up by Senator Waters. But that being said, still for the record, I'd like to provide concerns that we had with the original bill in the event we go back there at some point in the future. Concerns that we have is that the way that we interpret the bill is that everybody pays into it, and municipalities can get their funding back, and they can apply for grants under the program.
Now, this is under the original bill.
Original bill, yep. And businesses can also apply for those grants. And we're in support of that. The concern that we have is that half of the customers that we have are commercial industrial generators. So folks in the state that, for a small business, $1.50 a ton is not a lot of money. But for larger businesses, they don't have the ability to recoup those funds under the original writing of this bill. So we would ask that they be added. There's some concern on the constitutionality of treating the municipalities and the businesses differently under the bill as originally written, but we think that it can be modified in such a way that our concerns are addressed. So that's an important issue for us. The other issue, really significant one that we have, is just getting a bill like what was originally proposed on the books. And again, at the fee that it's at, it's not significant, but there's nothing to limit future legislative bodies to basically use that mechanism to go from $1.50 to $5 to $10 a ton, and it becomes significant at that point. So again, I think there's changes that could be made to the original bill to address those concerns that we have and we're expressing this morning, but those are some of the significant issues that we had with the original writing. But we are encouraged with what has been submitted this morning as an amendment, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Any questions? Seeing none?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, great, thank you. I've got written testimony I'd like to just leave
Please.
behind. Okay, thank you.
The last person signed up speaking, but neither in favor nor opposed.
Should have said in favor.
Okay. It's Representative Ebel. Welcome.
Thank you very much to the committee for being here today. And for the record, my name is Representative Karen Ebel. I'm here in support of SB 379, and I represent Merrimack District 5, which is New London and Newbury. One of the benefits of coming last is you hear a lot about what other people have said. I just wanted to say to Senator Gaida that I do have a summary of the Commerce Clause law that has been provided to us by the Attorney General's office, and I'd be happy to provide that to the committee. Yeah. I urge this committee to pass SB 379. I was here originally to speak in favor of this disposal surcharge. I also am in favor of this amendment because if you haven't already gotten the feeling, I think New Hampshire is in quite the solid waste crisis at this point, and one of the ways to help turn the ship around is to do some additional funding. We really have a problem because our region is extremely active, the states and our other states in our region in this regard. They've been working really hard, and we're sitting right here in the middle. We've done very little planning. You've made reference to the decision by China to stop taking a lot of our waste in 2019. It was on that basis and because of all the problems that that caused for our municipalities that I introduced a bill to create the HB 617 Study Committee on Solid Waste Management. Well, that proved to be a wild journey, and I think we touched a chord because over an 8-week period, we had 14 hearings and over 50 stakeholders participated in those hearings. And it's hard for me to think of one group that didn't desperately wish that they had more guidance from the state on what to do with solid waste. And this was particularly for municipalities who were thrown into having to deal with a global market, and they just didn't have adequate guidance. In my testimony, I've given you a link to the recommendations and the report of that study committee. Several of the items that we recommended have been noted. First of all, we had to redefine our solid waste goal. Believe it or not, that goal had been set to be achieved by the year 2000 and had never been updated. So we've now updated that. One of our goals was to update our compost regulations because, believe it or not, food waste constitutes 20 to 25% of weight going into landfills, and we were supposed to get our composting regs done since 2015. We hadn't done that. We've passed a bill now to ensure that that gets done, and it should be done soon. And we also wanted to recast our long-range solid waste plan, and that is in process. The other thing that was very much on the minds of the study committee, and I feel that I can speak for it because I did chair it and it was a bipartisan group that made the report, was the creation of what Mr. Poggi referred to as the Solid Waste Working Group. We've now convened that, and I've been elected as the chair. And one of the first things we looked at, Senator Guida, was the Commerce Clause and its effect on us. And that's why I happen to have the AG's opinion that I can provide to you. And I think many of us know we hadn't done a solid waste long-range plan since 2003. And so we're just sitting here while the rest of the world is swirling around us doing planning, and we've done virtually nothing. You can't plan without some sort of funding. And because the Solid Waste Bureau has been general funded, it just hasn't had money, and it's had cuts. The planning division was completely wiped out. And so one of the things that we did as part of our recycling committee is that we learned that many states, the majority of the states for a long time, have had disposal surcharges on tipping fees. There's nothing unique about this. You know, we have many functions in the state that are supported by fees. This would be another one. I realize that the bill, and now you are faced with an amendment, but I hope you will keep in mind that we're surrounded by states that use surcharges to fund their activities so that they can better plan for the people of their state. Our reduction goal is to achieve 25% by 2030, 45% by 2050. We know it's not mandated. Those are our goals. I just want you to know in Massachusetts, by comparison, they are trying to reduce their solid waste by 90% by 2050. Speaking as the solid waste chair and as a legislature, I personally, and I think we all should feel, a huge responsibility to the people in our state to do something about our solid waste situation. Right now, our go-to method is landfilling. It just can't be that anymore. It's wasteful on every level. It's getting increasingly expensive, and it won't get better if we don't do something now. I just want to give you a snapshot of what we mean when we talk about the DES Solid Waste Bureau being overwhelmed. Just because I've been very involved in this recently, I personally know of what one staff person is supposed to be doing. This is the same person who was transferred to the newly created, we now have a planning department, and there's one person in it. Okay, so he's supposed to do the long-range plan, which hasn't been done since 2003, by October 1st, according to our legislation. He's supposed to prepare for and testify on all the legislation on solid waste that is introduced. So that's like, I think this time it's 20 bills. He helps work on the fiscal notes. He sits at hearings. He's back here now. He's working on the composting regulations. He's supposed to prepare the 2001 biennial solid waste report, which was due last year. He's working through our new diversion goal standards. He's supporting the solid waste working group, and still he's supposed to have the long-range plan done by October. This is what we mean when we say that the staff is at a crisis level and we need more help. I'm beyond thankful for the Bureau's diligence, but gratitude just doesn't pay the bills. And whether we do this through a surcharge or we do it through this alternative funding or both, we just really have to do something. I mean, I looked at the infrastructure bill, $275 million for grants for this sort of thing, and I think we have to set up a vehicle to receive it. The only other thing I would say is that the solid waste working group is going to be working very diligently to support the agency in its work on the long-range solid waste plan, but we really can't wait to fund the activities of the Solid Waste Bureau until our recommendations come through. They need the money now, and I would really appreciate you appropriating it. And I know especially the people in the North Country who find themselves in the eye of the landfill storm would appreciate that. Lots of people are watching what we're doing at a policy level here, and I think we need to show our good faith and move this forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative, for coming here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to give us all of this information, and I appreciate all of the work that you've done for several years now on solid waste in our state. Can you tell me, the way the amendment is rewritten, and I don't know if you've had a chance to really think about it.
I did just get it, but that's okay.
Okay. The $500,000 that is appropriated to the department is for matching grants. Does that actually help them do their duties, or is the way it's written, does that go towards matching grants and just put another burden on the department to give out, to do another function?
You know, actually, I mean, Senator Waters maybe can help with this, but when I first learned of this amendment, that was the first place that my mind went to, because I mean, there are a lot of other bills, solid waste related bills, they want the department to do a lot, but you can't keep putting more burdens on the department without giving it what it needs to fulfill its duties. And Senator Waters notes that on page 2, line 1, it says the fund may be used to hire consultant contractors or to pay other necessary expenses directly associated with the approved activities in this chapter. So, yeah, I mean, we have a lot of hopes and dreams, and we want DES to help us with them. They just, I hope by specifically going through the workload of this one individual that helped you understand what a situation we find ourselves in. And I mean, just speaking on behalf of all the people that we heard from during the recycling study committee process, all the people that I hear from now, and all the people that really are watching the live stream of the solid waste working group, this is just a really huge topic in our state. And I feel like, I hate to say it, I feel like we're sitting ducks if we just don't wake up and do something to rectify our problems. I guess that was direct.
Further questions? I have a question, and that is, if we need more staff, why did DES not come through the normal budget process? 'Cause they
I mean,
just
I
suddenly
believe they
discovered this.
did. I believe they did, and I don't, and I think, I mean, Mr. Wimsat is here, and this is one of the issues when I make the, when I make the point so strongly, but I think actually this time when they went through the budget process, they were authorized to hire another person to help with the solid waste bureau, so I know that that's in process, so that there will be 2 people in their planning department instead of 1. But, yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, there's a lot of catch-up to do. And I can't speak for what has happened in the last 10 or 15 years and who asked for what and why what was slashed.
Further questions? Senator Daniels.
Thank you. Why do you believe that staff at DES making up paper plans is more effective in reducing solid waste than local volunteers that are actually putting things in process, like educating the residents on composting or making recommendations on separation of things?
Senator Daniels, I would say that it's a collaborative effort, and you are correct that local groups are very effective in doing, in getting the word out there. But one of the issues is to hand the local groups what they need to educate people. I mean, I can volunteer on a solid waste committee, but I'm not an expert. And I think that a paper plan will become a living plan if you put together educational tools and technical assistance to provide to the municipalities so that they can go ahead and do what they do best, and that is work directly with their people. I think I said earlier that during our recycling study committee hearings, municipalities were literally begging for assistance and help from the state. They wanted more guidance. They want to be given the tools. And, you know, it takes experts and the state to give the municipalities those tools. Reagan Bissonette isn't here today from the NRRA, who does a lot of support for the local municipalities on the issues of recycling. And she said they have so many requests for technical assistance. They can't do all that these folks need for help to do the local work. And she pointed out that in Massachusetts, they actually have 8 facilitators to actually work directly with municipalities to support them. So I grew up in New Hampshire. I believe in local control. I believe in all those things, but sometimes you need a little help from above. And I think that the state could be a real good tool to support municipalities and the residents that depend on them taking their trash or fulfilling all those functions.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
I'll get you the Attorney General's
Thank you.
memo.
And that, now, if I may, that is an opinion of the Attorney General? Or is it a court decision in a federal court case?
So what it is it's a summary of the law on the Commerce Clause that includes summaries of court cases. So, yes, he summarizes the court. So there are court cases, right?
Okay,
Not-
I would like to see that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely. I
I'm
mean,
sure the members-
I've talked a long time, but I just need to make one point, and that is that New Hampshire relies quite a bit on private landfills. And private landfills are subject to the restrictions of the Commerce Clause. Landfills like the one that's operated by Lebanon or by Nashua, those are publicly owned landfills, and they aren't subject to the same restrictions.
They are?
They are not.
They are not.
They are not. So, you know, in New Hampshire, we did have a vehicle for solid waste districts. You know, some towns availed themselves of that opportunity. A lot of them did not. And that's why we're in a situation now where we have such reliance on private landfills. And I mean, I could go on, but let me just give you an example. I referenced it in my testimony. Massachusetts' average tipping fee is $122. And Vermont is $116, Rhode Island is $100, and New Hampshire is about $80. If you were a town in an adjoining state that was really interested in saving your taxpayers' money, why wouldn't you look over the border at New Hampshire as an opportunity to save some money and bring your trash here? This is the issue. So when you talk about something like the Dalton landfill or a new private landfill, what you have to understand is that landfill is subject to the restrictions of the Commerce Clause, and you have an immediate opportunity right there for about half of the trash to go into the private landfill from out of state.
Right. Okay. Thank you for your testimony.
Sure, thank you.
All right. So we have one more signed up to speak, and that would be Mike Wimsat. Mike from DES, come on up.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Wimsat. I serve as Director of the Waste Management Division for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And with me here today, I have Mike Nork, who is the person who currently is administrator of our newly formed Materials Management Education and Planning section. And now we're happy to come here and speak to you about Senate Bill 379. First of all, I want to emphasize that I think I'm going to confine my remarks to the amendment that Senator Waters has presented to you this morning. The agency supports this amendment. specifically with regard to the appropriation, we're not taking a position, but as far as the policy matters associated with the amendment, we were in support. Essentially what this would do would be to create a new grant program where none currently exists in New Hampshire right now. I will tell you that I have interacted with many of my colleagues in the neighboring states, and virtually all of them have a robust grant program that is designed to incentivize recycling, incentivize waste reduction, incentivize technologies that are higher up on the waste management hierarchy than landfilling, to a point where even a minor grant program in Massachusetts on an annual basis may hand out more money to municipalities and businesses than our entire solid waste budget for the year in New Hampshire. So it's we're really behind when it comes to that incentivization, and that is in part, one of the causes for maybe not making as much progress on advancing facilities like compost facilities or a materials recovery facility that would be located here in the state. Much of the recyclables that get handled and collected here in the state that are like single sort, where it's just a blend that has to go to a materials recovery facility or MRF for processing, actually have to go out of state to get processed in that fashion, because we don't have that kind of a throughput sorting facility here in New Hampshire. So that's important, and that's why we support this. Senator Waters made reference to the federal dollars that may be coming, and it is true. When we look at and we've spoken with our counterparts at EPA, when we look at the bipartisan infrastructure law, we find that it's very likely that some significant funds will be provided for grants. It's not clear. EPA is still sort of figuring out what that grant program is going to look like. It will likely be, in part, a totally competitive grant program that would just go to be available to states, counties, municipalities, and others to compete for grant dollars to help advance recycling in their communities. A portion of it is also likely to be implemented as what we call a STAG grant, or a state territorial assistance grant, and where those grants would typically go only to state governments and territorial governments. And in that case, there's a good chance that we will have access to funding in New Hampshire through that STAG grant program. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like in terms of timing, because I know there was some discussion about that. Our expectation, from what we're hearing from our counterparts at EPA, is that those funds would likely start to become available in the first quarter of the fiscal year that starts in October of this year, federal fiscal year. And then, but likely that might be when the grants are actually advertised, so it's possible we wouldn't see that money for well into 2023. In any event, that's something we would pursue very vigorously. It's not entirely clear to us what that's going to look like, and I do want to speak to one issue that I think Senator D'Alessandro, you mentioned the shall versus may language on line, I think it's line 5 of page 2. The reason I think that that's a may at this point is that because we don't know exactly what that grant program will look like from EPA, it could have different provisions, or it could be applicable to different things. It may or may not be appropriate to put all the STAG funds that we would get into this fund, because there may be some that are for purposes that aren't really related to this fund. And that's really why I think that language is in there. I think, that we're not really particularly concerned about that. But what I wouldn't want to do is have us be in a position where the law would require us to put those funds into a fund, into this fund, and then box us into not being able to actually comply with the federal grant requirements. So we're just trying to make sure we don't disadvantage the state by having language that would be a little too confining. I guess also just to clarify a little bit on the surcharge discussion, and I think Representative Ebel did a great job of explaining, that, but I would augment it by saying when the surcharge was first passed, it was specifically targeted at out-of-state waste explicitly in the law. It was collected in New Hampshire for just a few months, I believe, and then we were advised, the agency was advised by the Department of Justice to stop collecting the fee because it was in violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause. So that's why that ceased, and the the provision has remained on the books for many years, but it hasn't been implemented because of that guidance. So, I don't believe that there was a specific court case in New Hampshire on that topic, but the AG was advised by ample case law in related cases around the country that brought them there.
Mike, what was the date of that opinion? Was it recently, or was it some years back?
Actually, the opinion that Representative Ebel referred to is very recent. It was something that was requested by the Solid Waste Working Group, and the Department of Justice provided a memo to that effect.
So it's recent?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Right. And then I guess the other thing I would just want to speak to, because there was some discussion with the other folks who are testifying, as far as the budget process goes, I'm happy to say, and I've been at this for a while, and I have struggled mightily to keep this Bureau resourced over time. Not proud to say I sort of presided over a dismantling of positions in the Bureau for a number of years, not because I wanted to, but that was what was happening with the pressures of state budgeting. But I'm happy to say that this legislature and this governor's administration has been very supportive of our solid waste efforts. And in the last state budget process, we did advance a number of new positions that were approved. We have not actually filled many of those positions yet. We still have 5 vacancies in the Bureau. We're working as we speak to get those filled, and we're anxious to do that and anxious to get down to the work that's been discussed here. Just wanted to make clear that the conditions that we saw for the last 10 or 15 years have changed in the Bureau, but we haven't quite caught up with the actual personnel to get that work done.
So is that, you said you have 5 positions?
We currently have 5 vacant positions in the Bureau that we're seeking to fill.
Will that be sufficient?
I think that it's going to put us in a place we've not been for many, many years, and will put us in a place to do, much of the work that's been required of us that we've been unable to fulfill. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to be in a good place once we get these positions filled, and presumably we can keep them through the subsequent budget processes. I'm optimistic that our Bureau will be much more effective than it has been able to be in previous years.
Would the department be willing to put language in where we're talking on line 5, page 2 of the amendment? We stick with may be deposited into the fund, but shall only be used for the purposes described in this chapter. So no matter where the money goes, so that we're consistent with whatever federal guidelines might come, we know it's only going to be used for this purpose.
Obviously, any monies that would be put into the fund would absolutely only be used for the purpose. I don't think I would be in a position to promise that any federal funds that we would seek would be only used for this purposes, because we could seek, first of all.
Now, maybe I wasn't clear. Any funds received under this particular legislation?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so we may put them in a certain fund, but to keep us from being restricted from using them, we'll just ensure that they're used for the purposes in this legislation.
Absolutely. Any state funds appropriated and any federal funds that fit into this fund would absolutely only be used for the stated purposes here.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Senator Daniels.
Is the solid waste management fund structured so that it's solely for matching? Or can grants be given out of it?
Well, that's what this amendment says, and I think, it's an amendment that's in play, I guess, at this point, but that matching language comes from the original bill and was retained in the amendment. I think if the legislature decided that it wanted some portion of the funds, say for municipalities, to be available without a match, then it could be changed to reflect that. And again, it's not clear what the match is. It just says matching funds. So a match could be a 50-50 match, could be a 10% match. And it would be up to the legislature to decide that, obviously.
So Mike, does the department have a definition of a revolving special fund? Is there actually a terminology definition there? Maybe Senator Waters might be able to help out with that.
Yeah.
To me, a revolving fund is one where funds are taken out and then put back in. And so is there an implication here that communities are going to pay back any of this? So I'm just wondering if revolving fund is the appropriate term is the question.
I'm happy to answer that, but I don't want to speak for Senator Waters.
Yeah.
So that term is a broad term used for a fund that will continue to exist biennium to biennium. It doesn't necessarily mean that funds are going to be repaid. We have a number of revolving loan funds where that is indeed the case.
Right.
But obviously, a grant here is a grant, and once it's made, there's no
Okay.
expectation to be repaid.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Del Sandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mike. Always good to hear your testimony. How many vacancies are there in the department as we speak?
In the whole department?
Yes.
You know, I'm sorry, Senator, I don't know the answer to that. It's many, it's in the tens. I think there may be as many as 50 or 60 vacancies. Just if we have some turnover, obviously, and as many people know, whether you're in the private or public sector, recruiting and hiring people right now is a very difficult thing.
Further question?
Sure.
Okay. So, if you're allotted personnel, the ability to get these personnel is problematic at this point, is it not?
It is, you know, a couple of the positions are engineering positions in our permitting section of the Bureau. Those are particularly difficult because you need to have a licensed professional engineer for those positions, and those folks have a pretty good job market right now, so we struggle with that. I think the other positions, we'll get them filled. We're literally, I mean, I think they've been posted, and closing dates are coming upon us, so I'm hoping that next time I might be here, I could give you some good news about that.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Senate remote testimony, in summary, I'm not going to read it all. We have 54 people signed up in support and 1 in opposition. And now that's to the bill, I think. I don't believe that does the amendment. So in a sense, it's really not relevant, but it's good for the record. All right. Is there anyone here who has not yet testified and wishes to, or has testified once, would like to testify again? Seeing none, hearing is adjourned. And we will take a recess for 30 minutes. So back here at,
So we're going to reconvene.
yeah.
30 minutes.
And let me restate that. We are recessed as opposed to adjourned for 30 minutes. Going to the sauna. All right, it being 11:50, we'll come out of recess. And the Chair would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Move executive session.
Moved by D'Alessandro, seconded by Daniels. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Looking for a motion on Senate Bill 441.
I would move IPO on Senate Bill 441.
Put your mic on, Don. There you go. Yeah.
I would move ITL on Senate Bill 441 and explain why.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by D'Alessandro, second by Daniels on ITL. Go ahead, please.
I think both the Department of Transportation and the Department of Safety spoke in opposition to the bill. And I think that the complexity in ascertaining what the break would be is just almost impossible to do. And just look at the penalty assessment, which comes on a ticket. The penalty assessment now is divided between the general fund, the Victims Assistance Fund, and the judicial branch. So how would you decide which part of that would go to the local municipality where the ticket is given? And on the DOT side, we've already got a highway fund that's in balance. We put 50 million in general fund revenues to the highway fund. I think we're gonna continue to do that. And Marie Mullen indicated that we would possibly, the DOT would possibly lose $1 million if this transaction took place. So I think it's the wrong, it's just the wrong time to do something like this. I applaud the senator for her desire to help the local municipality, but I think there are better ways to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any other comments? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion of ITL on Senate Bill 441 FNL, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Who's going to take that out?
No, I'll take it.
All right.
Consent. Yeah.
And consent?
Consent.
Second? Okay. Consent by Rosenwald, second by Hennessy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. That's it for today.
So move out of executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded by D'Alessandro and Daniels. Out of exec. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to adjourn.
Move to.
Moved and seconded.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Yes.
Close